my bar is high. I mean, I set that bar high, and it's nerve-wracking staring at a blank canvas.
Sometimes you're going to get to a little uphill, and it's going to lose some steam, and you got to be ready to push just like you pushed the first time.
I don't care if I get 2 likes on a painting that I love, because that doesn't matter.
Just start taking action. Sometimes that's all you need.
And there's a global reach. But what it really comes down to is the human one-on-one.
Traveling to Spain to research a new topic, like it's almost like the writer of a book.
Interesting too with Bono and U2. I remember when Facebook kind of came out, sort of thing. I remember he invested in Facebook at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And he made more, like in the first couple of years through Facebook stock, that he made in his entire career being a musician with U2, which was like a few $100 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not rolling now, right?
We are rolling now. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Now we're rolling. Yeah. So, so we can kind of start it up. So, cool. Basically, you know me, I'm Jordan Geske. This is Paul Van Ginkel, Calgary artist. Started in 1983. Been painting for over 40 years and over 2,200 paintings, which is like a painting a week for 4 decades.
Oh, you did the math.
Yeah. As soon as I was like, what is the math on that? Yeah. So we're here. Just kind of want to dive into like your story, and like this is your Olympics coming up here, right?
Yeah,
like this is the big day for you. You're a big Western artist, and the Stampede's always a big gallery for you that you do in the Western Oasis. So thank you for taking the time out of the busy schedule. I know it's literally probably closer to Christmas for you, right?
Well, thanks, Jordan.
Yeah.
Always good seeing you.
Yeah.
We've been great friends the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And I admire what you do, and happy to be in your orbit.
Yeah.
Stampede time. I was telling Donovan, the cameraman, just before we came on air here, yesterday I just finished my last Calgary Stampede painting. So as we speak, it's drying. After this interview podcast, I'm going to go and bring it to my photographer to get photographed. And then I've shifted gears, so the creative is done. All the paintings are done. Now it's all the logistics. Getting
Business
things,
side.
Yeah, you bet, getting things dry, varnished, photographed, framed, packaged.
So let's give a little quick for the people who don't know Paul's paintings, and we'll put a few up on the screen as we talk about it right now. But your paintings, especially the first time I saw them. So the first time I met Paul, I was hoping to do a documentary on him, which luckily he did allow me to do. You can find that as well. But the first time I met him, I only saw his paintings online, and that doesn't do it justice. When you see his paintings in person, they range from 5 to 6.5 feet tall or something, right? Like, so those paintings, how long does that take to dry? Like they're huge.
Yeah, I mean, they're oil paintings, so yes, they take some time to dry. So the drying time is relative to the amount of paint, obviously, how thick the painting is. An artist can put a liquid medium into their paints, which is a drying device. So depending on how much you put in, it dries accordingly. So I put the right amount in that, I could still work back into the painting when it's wet the next day or two, and then it dries properly.
Yeah.
Getting back to what you were saying, Jordan, about, seeing things in person. I remember when I went to art college, it's all very well and nice to, study the great masters through slides. Back then it was slides, back in the 70s and 80s when I went to school, and, color plates and books and so on. But until you stand in front of a painting in a museum, you don't know. Because with paintings, it's not just, the captured image, it's the scale and the energy of said painting. And, truthfully, not everybody gets that and feels that, and that's fine. But those who do, it's quite a moving experience. So you're right. I mean, most of my stuff, of course, is advertised through social media and websites and such. But you got to stand in front of the painting to really get it. And as you pointed out, your reaction is what most people react, the way most people react in terms of scale and the intensity and the energy of the pieces. And that's what I try to convey. So so many things go into creating a painting. It's not just selecting a subject that you're inspired to paint, but how big should it be? And the technique and the palette and all those kind of logistical, creative things. So they have to all come together. So I like to think that I choose subjects that are important, at least to me, and command a larger scale. I'm not one to do small paintings because they're going to fit in certain small locations. I want to, justify doing this painting and the image and immortalize it to the capacity that it should be. So scale and so on has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And along with the paintings, you have such beautiful frames to match them. And what's the selection process on that? 'Cause
Yeah.
every time I do see a painting, I think, oh, that's the perfect frame for it that you've put on. And I got a couple prints that you gave me, but then I went and I bought the frame that I saw them in because I was like, that frame brings that to life as well. It's so complementary to it. Like,
every part of the presentation of a painting is important, obviously. Like why drop the ball with a frame? Not every painting that I do or paintings in general require a conventional frame. Some of the more contemporary ones, like the way I operate, is some of my larger, more contemporary paintings, like my abstract horses and stallions and such. I don't put a conventional frame on those. It's what you call gallery wrapped, where you just kind of paint the sides of the canvas, so it's a nice, clean, finished look. The person who ends up acquiring the painting, they can put a conventional frame on it if they want to. Realistically as well, frames are expensive.
Yeah,
good frames are. So if I put a painting on the market that doesn't have a conventional frame, I won't ask as much for it, which makes it a little easier for somebody to acquire it.
Yeah.
But with frames itself, the selection of frames, it's like a marriage. I mean, they have to work together. They're together visually and physically and aesthetically and all that stuff. So it's critical. And I don't skimp on my frames. It has to be right, and that's a whole art form in itself. I go to Norberg Hall Gallery to get my frames. I choose my frames there, and I use them to frame my pieces, and that's a process. Because there are hundreds of selections. It narrows it down to with every painting there's usually an obvious half a dozen frames or whatever that really work, but there's a real difference. You put the unframed painting there, you put up different frames up to it, and it almost becomes a different painting. So that process is very important, and I'm part of that process as well.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah.
So you briefly touched on back in school and seeing the other artists that inspired you.
Yeah.
Was it simply seeing other artists at a young age that inspired you? What drove you into this career and kind of lifestyle?
Yeah, it's one of those things that when we're all in high school, we've all been there. You kind of sit back and think, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? We all have to make life decisions at such a young age. We're only 17, 18 years old. So I was in that position, obviously, way back in 1977, 78. And I thought, well, I like my art classes. I'm pretty good at it. I wasn't a protege or whatever, but I just really enjoyed it. So those things were in place. And then only back in grade 12, I found out about the Alberta College of Art. Way back there in the late 70s, it was called the Alberta College of Art, which was a department of SAIT, the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. So I applied, I got accepted, and the rest is sort of history. So two things happened in my first year. I mean, one, I showed some promise, and two, and most importantly, I just loved it. I just loved it. I thought this just really resonates with me. But I was an average student, grade-wise. I thought I did decent work, whatever, but it's a process. And that said, way back at ACA, so then it became Alberta College of Art and Design, which is a college, diploma granting college. And now, I think about 5 or 6 years ago, it's now a university. So it's called Alberta University of the Arts. So it's come a long way. But way back when I went, every first-year student has to take general studies. So a variety of different classes to kind of get their groove and decide what kind of major you want to go into. Most students want to go into visual communications. which is like commercial art,
Yeah.
advertising art,
Yeah.
largely because one can get a job after that, with an agency or be an illustrator or whatever. So that was my route. But my grades weren't high enough to get into to proceed into my major. So I considered dropping out and working for my father's construction company, because that's one thing he wanted me to do. So I hummed and hawed and talked to a lot of friends and family. But there was one counselor at ACA that encouraged me to go back for the second year, take painting classes and printmaking, and then apply to my major as a direct entry, of which I did and got accepted. So essentially then I was going to be on a 5-year program. But in my 5th year, I applied for a job at the Calgary Herald newspaper as an editorial illustrator, and I got the job. So that too was a big decision. So that was in 1983. It was a big decision to drop out of art college.
Yeah.
I mean, I had 4 years under my belt, and again, I was on a 5-year program, if you will. Essentially 2 first years and a 3-year major after that. But I didn't regret it at all. I mean, it was a job. It was a good job. I was an illustrator at the Calgary Herald, so I was not a editorial cartoonist. I illustrated stories.
Yeah. So it's like, could you give an example of that? So basically, if they didn't have a photo or a photographer to be able to send out there, you would basically draw the scene.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Jordan.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
So if you were the writer, I would meet with you, the writer, and the editor. I would read your story. And so these were mainly feature stories. And so collaboratively, I would come back with concepts and ideas and so on. I would pitch it to you, the writer and the editor, and then we would decide on what kind of illustration that should go along with that article. And historically, back then and still, just like a book cover. So the purpose is to create an image that is so compelling that the person reads the story or the book. And if and when that happens, and the illustrator, gets paid, sort of thing, they're successful. So that's the point. But working for the Herald, I always knew that had a certain kind of shelf life. In that I always wanted to be a painter, like a full-time painter.
Yeah.
And even though I was being trained as an illustrator and a commercial artist, I knew that the discipline of that in art college would give me the right skills, because I was being taught the painting courses and printmaking courses back in college. It was like too much freedom. The students had too much latitude and freedom. I didn't want that. I wanted the instruction. I wanted to be told, and with techniques and business and stuff like that. So I resigned at the Calgary Herald, effective January 1st, 1990, and I've been a full-time fine art painter for now 42 years or so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Structure is very important for learning anything.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that. It reminds me of like Malcolm Gladwell, the writer. He wrote Outliers about the 10,000 hours that you have to put in.
Yeah, you bet.
Like, could you say you put in 10,000 to get to the level you wanted to be, or once you started painting, how much of it carried over from the drawing side and the illustration side? Was it like starting from the ground up, or you had a good leg up?
Over the years, I've certainly put in a lot of hours. The amount, I don't know, but structure, as you mentioned, Jordan, as well as, structure and discipline to me are, similar. I think discipline is one of the most important attributes and words, and it's not like a bad word. You got to be disciplined to be a good friend.
Yep.
You got to be disciplined just to get stuff done. And to be a painter, a studio painter, a gallery painter, it's a solitary existence. Some artists aren't comfortable with that. They want more interaction, so some of them work with other artists. I choose to be like a bit of a lone wolf that way. But it takes discipline to check in every morning and go to work. But I'm only human. A lot of times I don't want to go to work, but I go to work.
Yeah.
Of course I go to work.
Yeah.
I work hard like the next guy that works hard.
Yeah.
And I've always known, right from the start, nothing will happen if I don't do the work. You just got to do the work. You got to put in those hours. And that's not a bad thing. And even to this day, even though I've done, as you mentioned, over 2,200 paintings or something, every one I do, I'm kind of nervous about. There's a little insecurity and stuff, for a lot of reasons, including my bar is high. I mean, I set that bar high, and I have to reach that bar. That's the pressure I put on myself, and that's okay. And it's nerve-wracking staring at a blank canvas.
Yeah, yeah.
I know what I'm going to paint, because the image is in place, and I know what I'm going to do. A lot of my paintings are inspired by previous paintings and so on. But once I get started, once that first brush lands on the canvas, and you get going, and I liken the creation of a painting to almost like, you're rolling a boulder and you got to keep on pushing. All of a sudden, it starts rolling on its own.
Yeah.
So in other words, it has a life of its own.
It's like going to the gym. The most important day is the first day you go.
Yeah.
The second important is the second day you go, right? Yeah. Starting it is just, that's the hardest part. Once you get the boulder going, it's going to keep going. It's a snowball, right? But you got to keep pushing. Sometimes you're going to get to a little uphill.
Yeah.
And it's going to lose some steam.
Yeah.
And you got to be ready to push just like you pushed the first time.
I like that analogy because it's, clearly it's transferable.
Yeah.
And with a painting, I try to bring it to life in a sense and tell me what it wants. Like, it's like, speak to me, not to be silly, but really, and all of a sudden it starts to form its own language and not literally, and in that regard, but just its own style and language. And I honor that and I roll with that. And that's part of the reason why I paint alone and I don't answer the phone and I just listen to my music because I'm acutely aware of what's happening with that painting. Because every single brush I put down affects that painting. Of course it does, and it's a real yin yang. Do something over here, you got to address it over there. I like these little analogies, but it's almost like a symphony conductor. You got to get all the music working together. That's how painting is. Top to bottom, left to right. And with that too, the way I choose to paint and the way I naturally paint is more kind of emotional and expressive as opposed to like rendering and photorealism and stuff. A lot of painters paint that way and it's fantastic. But I don't paint that way. And with that too, the entire image or canvas or painting is executed differently because I'm reacting differently to different parts of that painting, Like if I'm doing a portrait, the most important thing is the face. Within the face are the eyes and the mouth. The mouth gives more of an expression than the eyes with people in portraits. But then everything else is like a supporting cast. So I'll treat it that way. And at the end of the day, at the end of the painting, I often like those more abstract aspects of the painting more than the subject, if I were to choose.
Yeah.
And ironically, those are kind of the harder parts. Like to be simple is often harder to execute than rendering. Like a good painter will get everything eventually with enough time, but a real kind of genius painter will get it, quickly.
Yeah.
And it looks like a mess when you go up to it, but you back off and there it is.
Yeah.
And that's what I strive to do with my work.
Yeah.
It's just to say more with less. You don't need a lot of time. What's time? That's the number one question asked to me all the time with my paintings. How long did it take you to paint it? Fair question. So, outside of, working at the easel, the preparation and the inspiration and the thinking and mental thinking and emotional thinking sometimes literally takes years. There have been paintings I've done that I've thought about them like literally for 20 years. Like meaning I've gone on a photo shoot or something, met a bunch of, characters and photographed them and looked at the
flamenco you just did recently over the last year. Like how long ago did you take those photos? You took
those are 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad thing to let those images, kind of, like writers too, right? I mean, writers write books, but think about books for years and years, 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
Same thing. All the arts are similar in that way. I know exactly how many hours it takes for me to do a particular painting because I keep track. I only work on one painting at one time. So I check into the studio, or if I start painting at 10 o'clock, let's say, if I finish 6 hours later, I'll write 6 on the side of my canvas. Once that painting's done, I'll add everything up. So I'll know how long it took me to do that painting. I'll put it into my books and so on. So I can say to a person asking, so that painting took, 37 hours. But again, what is time, right? I mean, all the other time to prepare goes into it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot about it. Now it seems really hard. So I think people can appreciate your work more. So we went over the process and what you kind of go through. There must be quite the carrot on the stick, right? Like it's something that keeps it so inspirational and makes you really want to keep doing it. Like what drives you the most when it comes to painting?
It's almost like I have no choice. Not because I have to make a living. I mean, of course I do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not those external pressures, but it's a visceral, internal, heartfelt, soulful thing that that's my happy place, creating. And again, I can't speak for other artists, but all artists will say a similar thing.
Yeah.
All artists, meaning painters and musicians and dancers and writers, we're all kind of programmed in a similar way.
Mm-hmm.
And I love all those other arts, especially music. I mean, I actually love music more than visual art.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people say, well, you love music so much, why don't you do music and you play an
Have you
instrument?
ever?
I have not. And the main reason is because creatively I'm spent with my painting.
Yeah.
And I'm a specialist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a painter. That's what I do.
Yeah.
And even within painting, I'm quite specific as well.
Yeah.
That's come with decades of experience. So I leave it all on the court. When I leave the studio, I'm spent. So I can enjoy the other arts, going to a ballet or opera or concert or whatever, as a spectator, and I'm okay with that. Because I prefer to be, specialized that way.
No, that's definitely fair.
Yeah.
So you've never dabbled in guitar, piano?
No, never have.
Interesting.
Never have. But again, I have such great admiration. I've got friends, obviously, who are musicians and so on, especially musicians, but dancers. And you mentioned my flamenco series.
Mm-hmm.
So when I use models, whether it be dancers, flamenco or ballet or otherwise, or some of my characters in my Western pieces, I get to know them. A lot of them become really great friends.
Yeah.
With all the dance forms, flamenco is my favorite, largely because of the beauty, of course, but the intensity of the dancer and the music and so on. And, when I started focusing more on flamenco paintings, I took a trip to Spain, to Sevilla, Madrid, and Jerez, to research flamenco culture. It was way back in 2008. Researched flamenco culture and meet some dancers, go to shows, and just get immersed with it.
Yeah.
And always, my entire adult life, there's always camera in hand.
Yeah. So there's so much more to it than just thinking about a subject. Like, so what does it really take to be that artist, right? Like an artist of like your standing. You did 2,200 paintings. And the coolest part about that, Paul, is that you don't have 2,200 paintings sitting somewhere. You got 2,200 paintings out in the world. Like you've been very successful at it. You have a business mind for it as well. But what does it take to like bring yourself to that level and prepare yourself? Like obviously traveling to Spain to research a new topic, like that's a lot. It's almost like the writer of a book. Yeah,
perhaps, Jordan, that's a good way of framing it. We're all different. We all do different things. That's my method. It's not original to me. I mean, a lot of successful people in any capacity or discipline, I suspect, operate in a similar way. So you want to, the number one thing by far is you want to experience it. You want to be there, and then allow that you become that in a certain way. And if it resonates with you, one of the many advantages about that artists have, respectfully, in this world is we're able to express our life experiences through our work. Which is fantastic. I like the fact that even though, performing art and music is recorded, I like visual, obviously I choose visual art because that's the only thing I'm good at. But I have something tangible. I have like proof of my work in a sense, and that's one of the biggest thrills, I have something physical, this is what I did, But getting back to some of your questioning, Jordan, I mean, it's the quality of the work. The work has to be excellent in my view. And I paint for myself, like initially solely for myself. And I got to be happy.
Yeah.
I got to be happy with the piece.
Yeah.
I got to be happy with it. And if the piece is not working, I don't abandon the piece, but I'm committed to it. And it's got to work. Not that I'm miserable if it doesn't, but I'm upset, and I'm upset with myself.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it has to meet my standard, and it has to make me happy, and I have to feel proud of that piece. And then whatever else happens with it, I'll package it up and I'll try to sell it and I'll do the business dance with it. But if I'm happy, that's all that matters. And, now with social media, I'm posting and so on. It's like, I don't care if I get 2 likes on a painting that I love, because that doesn't matter. I'm not trying to get crazy likes and everybody liking the same piece. No, if I like it, that's okay. Whatever happens, happens. But then, in order for me to keep on painting, I got to sell my paintings, and I learned that a long time ago, that in order for me to sustain myself as an artist and live my dream, I got to have a bit of a business head. I got to have a bit of a plan.
Yeah.
So, that was more of an acquired skill, not to imply that painting's not acquired. Of course it's acquired. You're not born to be a painter. You're not born to be a great painter, just like you're not born to be a world champion sprinter. You gotta train. And I like to think I'm getting better as I go. But the business thing was very, very conscious, was and continues to be. So it's a different hat altogether.
Yeah.
It's a left brain thing, creating his right brain. But there's an art to that too, or there should be, And it's a huge challenge. It's always a challenge to create a painting, of course, and to hit that bar that I mentioned. But the business aspect is a challenge, because I hate to say this, but you don't really need art. I mean, I think so, but the word on the street is you don't really. So it's my job to create something, not just that people need, quote unquote, but something great that people want, that they feel they have to have because they love it so much.
Yeah.
That's my job.
Yeah.
But once I create said piece, then all that machine gets in motion, and I got to package it up. I got to promote it properly. I got to, and so many of the business, like a lot of my colleagues are intimidated by the business, but a lot of it is just common sense, really, and transferable in any business, whether you're a sole proprietor or a big corporation. It's customer service. It's all kind of the obvious things, I'm a consumer. When I buy a painting or a couch, I want to be served, and I want information, and I want things to be easy. All that stuff is transferable in the art world.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's, the business side, sure, I think I'm a decent painter, and I'm proud of what I've done over the years, but I'm most proud of the fact that I'm still in business.
Yeah.
And it's because of that focus.
Yeah.
So the business side, meaning everything outside of actual painting, takes up probably 50 to 60% of my time. And again, I'm okay with that. I've accepted that.
And you keep them split pretty well?
Them split.
Keep them away from each other. Yeah.
Well, in terms of the rhythm, Jordan, I mean, I'm a creature of habit. And again, the discipline thing that I addressed. So I, go to the studio, same time every morning, check in. I do my social media and the business stuff, follow up and so on. And I never let things slide. And I'm not a procrastinator, because I don't believe in that, and it's a respect thing. But also, it clears my head so I can get to my painting and just focus on my painting.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, when I send you a text, you respond right away.
Yeah.
And the reason why I do that, because I'll read the text, and if I don't respond right away, I'm going to be thinking about that text when I'm painting.
Yeah, it really, procrastination, what it does, it ruins your anxiety levels. It just causes stress, because then you're just like, shit, I didn't deal with that. I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
And the more you put it off, the less you're going to want to deal with it, because it's going to grow as a bad taste in your mouth. I used to be a big procrastinator before I worked for myself.
Yeah.
When I worked for other people, I was a procrastinator. Now, it's like the exact opposite. Instead of waiting till the last day, I'll try to have a project done in the first 10% of my timeline. So I'm not thinking about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And whatever you procrastinate on is important stuff. In other words, the other stuff, you're not even thinking about it, so you're not procrastinating.
Yeah.
So if it's important, address it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like big or small.
I see that with a lot of people, and even with employees when they get stressed out. I'm like, look, I can see why you're stressed.
Yeah.
You have a lot of stuff that you're not doing. You're just thinking about doing. But you need to just take a little bit of action. Just start taking action. Sometimes that's all you need.
And maybe that little action too, Jordan, is just responding, saying, I'll address this tomorrow.
Yeah. Just saying, giving yourself a timeline.
Yeah, exactly.
I had one friend of mine who got pretty bogged up on their work. They also own a business, and they were well, I missed this, and now I'm stressed, and now I've been so stressed, it's taken me an extra month, and I don't know what to do. They're bugging me, the client, and I was like, you need to reassess from here, right? It doesn't matter that you're 30 days back on a couple projects, right? Mm-hmm. What matters is you need to tell them, hey, I'm 30 days back on a couple projects. Here's my new timeline. I'm getting started right now. Yeah. You need to readjust your timeline to be able to move forward properly, or else you're just going to continue being worried about it, right? Yeah. You need to reset. It's unfortunate if things get out of hand with procrastination, but because I know that's a problem in the modern world right now. I see it a lot, is people just leaving stuff till the last second. Everyone's got an escape. The distractions are everywhere with cell phones.
Yeah, and if they pause and think, why am I this way? They could probably identify it, and they should do something about it.
Yeah.
So I get all that stuff done in the morning at the studio, and it's with the sole intention to get to that easel, because that's top priority, and that's a must. And I don't rush that process. I get, and I'm thorough. I cross every T and dot every I, and do all my regular stuff. I have a workout, keep the health up as well, and then get to the easel. And that's the only thing that I'm focused on. I put in my AirPods. I shut myself out from the world, and I just get immersed in my work. And I try to create the best work. And with that too, when I was younger, I just turned 65. But when I was younger, I used to, work far more and longer, had the stamina, had the energy. But now, I don't work overtime. I don't work weekends. I work hard during the day like the next guy, and that's it, and I can shut it off. But in a day, in 4 or 5 hours, I can get a lot of painting done. And I'm not rushing anything, but it's just by virtue of the fact I've been doing it a long time. I can get a lot done. So I get a lot accomplished. And with that too, I don't put extra pressure on me. Let's say, Stampede show coming up, which is my biggest show of the year. I don't put pressure on saying I've got to have 20 paintings. No, I'm going to work as hard as I can. However paintings are ready, those are the ones that are going to be in the show.
Do you have a set timeline every year for when you start working on the Stampede? So every year you have kind of a new gallery that you're setting up, and it kind of usually has a theme to it.
Yeah.
And when do you decide on that theme? What does it, do you just do one painting in the last year and you're like, that's the one, I got to continue this for that, and you save it? Or is it you have a plan, I'm going to get this all done and then I'm going to start that? Or
those are great questions, Jordan. The way I've always operated is in a fluid capacity, meaning, I've got plans and I'm working on projects, but I allow things to shift. I reserve the right to change my mind overnight, sort of thing. Not that I do, but that flexibility. And I work in that arena. So if I have, probably 75% of my work is kind of for gallery sale, and 25% custom commission pieces. It depends on how busy I am with, committed commission pieces and deadline commissions. I usually reserve at least the full month of May and June to really focus on Stampede pieces. And if I have commissions, I often get extensions and so on until after Stampede, but I focus on that. And with every show, especially the Stampede, I always try to introduce new stuff. Not because that's a good marketing thing to do, even though it is. It's because I'm always pushing the envelope as an artist. I'm trying to grow. And again, I'm doing things to push me, for me to learn, to try new things, new techniques, new subjects that I've never done before, or a continuation of work I've done before. So that's the focus as well. But in the marketplace at a show, that attracts attention. I want to be unpredictable. I want to be unpredictable, and I want to, not shock, but I want to surprise people.
Yeah.
And when I choose those kind of new images, I'm choosing them because they're inspiring to me, and then it just increases the chances of that being my best work. If an artist does the same thing all the time, I don't know how they do it. I'd be bored out of my mind, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I was quite surprised with the Viking works.
There you go. That's something new too.
Take me too. They're amazing. They're really cool, really unique, really awesome set. And it's quite a difference from the Western and the Indigenous, but at the same time, it's not. There's still warriors of like a very prominent and strong culture, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, because there's always a thread,
Yeah.
And not that, of course, I can only speak of myself, but it's almost like it takes somebody else to tell you what you're doing or what you've done, because you do it kind of naturally as a creative person.
Yeah.
So there's a thread because, artists get to choose what they want to do for the most part, as I do. But yes, I mean, I love that, not all my stuff is people and carriages and such. Obviously, I've done a lot of horses and so on. But yes, I love that intense, noble, beautiful warrior in any capacity, whether it's a First Nations, Indigenous individual, Vikings, as you mentioned, samurai. We talked about that earlier. That kind of resonates with me. So it's like the beauty, the aesthetic of those individuals, whether it be the regalia of a noble chief, or the fierceness of a samurai, or the exotic nature of a Viking. And it's neat too, because I've often said, as I'm going to say now, you want to get to know something, paint it. Because you just focus. Like if you're painting something,
your details,
every
insane.
detail.
Yeah.
I'm painting, the little button on your cuff right now, so I'm focused on that.
Yeah.
If I wasn't painting it, I wouldn't pay attention to that. So you paint it because you're crossing all these bridges.
Yeah.
And then you're putting it all together. I mentioned earlier, like relative to Vikings, most artists, myself included, obviously, we paint what we know and what we've seen. I haven't seen Vikings. I've never met a Viking, but it's something that I've always loved as a kid and as an adult. It's been fascinating. And not to say that I'm motivated to paint them, because there's lots of global traction on Vikings, with all the Valhalla series and stuff, of which I haven't seen, and movies. So there's an appetite for that imagery. But it rings true with me. And the kind of results that I'm getting, I'm very pleased with. And because they're arresting, and they're expressive, and they're moody, and they're all the things that I look for in my work.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, speaking a little bit back about galleries and preparing for the Stampede Gallery, are there other galleries, or where you 2,200 paintings? How are you getting rid of these things?
They're stockpiled in a bunker. In the south of France or something.
Yeah.
The gallery world is its own animal. There are far more artists out there that would like to be in a gallery, have gallery representation than there are galleries. So galleries serve an important purpose.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
without question. Over the years, I have had galleries represent me, and what that means is, said gallery has a body of your paintings, a series of your paintings, and they try to sell them on your behalf, and they take a commission, and it's usually 50%.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's insane.
They work for it.
Yeah. Well, sorry to interrupt, but it kind of rings with me. You wouldn't need a gallery as much because you're 50-60% working on business.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Now, a lot of artists I know a lot of artists, and a lot of artists don't work on business like you do. And a lot of artists just don't have the patience for it, or the knack for it. And maybe that's where the gallery is going to ring true, is, well, we're going to help you with the business side of it. It's much like, you can look at any industry. You could look at a roofing industry. You could look at HVAC and say, okay, well, a guy, if an HVAC company calls you, you're not really going to be, okay, I don't know, this might be a scam or something, right? But if you go to Home Depot and there's an HVAC guy set up in a Home Depot, you're going to trust him because he's in Home Depot. Okay? So when you hear from an artist, if the artist isn't really known yet as well, I think that the gallery is going to give them that sense of like, okay, this person's in this gallery, they must be pretty good, right? And it's kind of a social proofing aspect.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, because
you framed that perfectly.
When we do marketing, the main thing that we work on is social proofing, right? So we don't even really like advertisements. The advertisements are just to show people our social proofing. We want to make sure that people know everything's bigger than it is.
Yeah.
Right. So we're working with some old old executives from the IBM days, and when I asked them what their goal always was with IBM, and I'm talking about like when IBM was the biggest company in the world, and one of them's my dad, and he'd ask his boss, what are we doing this week? And he's like, we're just trying to look bigger than we are. And they were the biggest company in the world. They did everything. And back then, biggest company in the world, I think it was like $400 million, right? So you can see how that's changed. But it's interesting to say the biggest company in the world, the only goal they have on the marketing side was look bigger than we are.
Yeah.
You're the biggest.
Yeah.
And that's how important it is to social proof, right?
Yeah.
So like 50%, it's absurd. But at the same point, I think if you're starting off, it might be worth it.
Yeah, I love the way you frame that, Jordan, by saying, the 50% of the time that I spend on my work and promoting myself takes care of that, if I was represented by a gallery. To backtrack with my experience with galleries, my first Calgary Stampede show was in 1991. This would be my 22nd show, so they're not consecutive. At that show, and the Stampede show was just, it's unbelievable. I mean, they estimate 400,000 people come through the art area alone. So the exposure is incredible, unsurpassed by any show over the course of 10 days. So at my first show in 1991, there were, noticeably several people, like maybe 4 or 5, that said to me, because I was doing Western stuff and so on, have you been to Santa Fe, New Mexico? I said, no, I've heard of it, but I've never been. That's a great art center. It's a big, great hub and so on. And I did my research, and Santa Fe was, and I believe still is, the 3rd largest art market in North America.
Wow.
And it's a city of like 100,000 people. So clearly a destination place for art. So I went to Santa Fe. 1992, I went to Santa Fe. And so that led to getting gallery representation in Santa Fe. So I went there for the purpose to see Santa Fe. They've got 300 galleries in this, smallish town or city. And I made contact with a lot of them, went through every gallery. So I got a representation. And so that kind of morphed into getting representation in most of the major centers in the Southwest U.S. And the Southwest U.S. because my stuff was Western, and that's the real focus there.
Yeah.
So that included, Scottsdale, Jackson Hole, Aspen, Palm Springs, San Antonio. So at one point in the mid to late 90s, I had a half a dozen, really good galleries representing me.
Oh, cool.
I was kind of overextended, but back then I was much younger and I was prolific. I was probably creating close to 90 or 100 paintings a year. So I could supply those galleries. And, even though in a sense it was bottom line driven, that, I was hoping to make some money off of them, for me it was mainly the exposure. Yeah. And to get into collections that I certainly didn't have access to, of which I did as a result of that. As I advanced with my career and focused more and more on individual marking and the amount of work I put into it, I slowly pulled out of those galleries because I wanted to do it all myself. And with that and with most things, it comes down to like a personality thing. You were saying earlier about a lot of artists just don't want to do that. And I understand that. And they want somebody else to speak on their behalf and promote the work. And galleries, most of them are excellent. They got experts that do that for them, and they're successful that way. But I'd rather meet my potential collectors and strike up a relationship. That's the wonderful side product or byproduct of that is you become friendly and they become comfortable with you, and then maybe they become your collectors. Some of my best friends started out being collectors, and that's such a great, satisfying thing. And again, at the end of the day, I mean, I keep all the money too, which is, from a business standpoint, that's important as well. Yeah. And, and that money, is the coal in the engine that keeps on, paying for my ability to keep on working as an artist. Yeah. So currently, I just have one gallery represent me in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Oh, cool. And they only have one painting. They want, despite that, they want to continue to represent me. So I'm happy that I have that leverage, and they're sort of like my agents, if you will, in the U.S., even though I still promote and sell in the U.S. By myself. But it's important for me, I think, to have that. And getting back to one of your other points, Jordan, once I got gallery representation in Santa Fe, I got more attention here back in Calgary.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
wow, really? You're in a gallery in Santa Fe?
Yeah.
And I never had a gallery in Calgary. I never tried to get gallery representation in Calgary because I lived here and I was doing all the legwork myself, anchored by the Stampede Show. There was a gallery in Banff and a gallery in Jasper that represented me, and that was only for a few years, whatever.
Yeah.
But now, I've just chosen to do it myself.
Well, it's almost exotic, even if you were to say to someone, they're like, "Oh, are you in any galleries in town?" "No, but I'm in Santa Fe," and they're like, "Oh, wow, that's cool," right? So that's some of that social proofing that we're talking about.
Yeah,
so it's interesting, right?
Yeah, it's a social proofing. I mean, I like that term. It's like packaging and branding and all those kind of catchphrases. But and I take all that stuff, very seriously. I mean, it's not lost to me that this is part of it too. This podcast.
Yeah.
And again, being a sole proprietor, I mean, it's like you're Martha Stewart. You are your brand.
Yeah.
And again, I take that very seriously. And so, I don't do my own framing, and I don't stretch my own canvases because somebody else can do that. But everything else, my fingerprints are all over it because not that I'm a control freak, but because I care, And if somebody buys one of my paintings, I deliver it, on your time, and I'll hang it and I'll stick around for a glass of wine or a meal, So, at the end of the day, that's fun. And it's, it's important to have a fun career. And this one certainly is, but it's part of what I do. And it's not, sure, it's work, but it's not work.
Yeah.
It's a natural thing. And so I you get me with every painting, in other words, absolutely.
Well, I think it builds, your paintings build confidence because you can see that they're great works. And then your interaction with these people, it builds trust. And together, those things, that's what's going to really build a relationship, right? The confidence and the trust, that's an ongoing thing now, right?
You bet, George.
If you buy a painting from a gallery and you don't meet the person, you might not become a collector of that painting.
Yeah.
There's a much lower chance, I would assume, than if the painter comes and hangs the painting, has a glass of wine, sticks around for dinner, tells you his life story, tells you why he painted that painting.
Yeah.
You might say, "Man, that was cool. I got to do that again." And the next time they see one that resonates of yours, and they see another one where they don't know the person, I assume they're going to want to know the story and they're going to want to have you over for that glass of wine.
There you go. And it's all that trust, and it's all that upfront stuff. You, me, and Brett were talking about this product coming on air, marketing and so on. I was part of a panel discussion a couple of weeks ago. And when I was asked about, my marketing, the first thing I said was the most important thing, which is the best marketing is just one-on-one.
Yeah.
It's just one-on-one, You can advertise, you can do social media, all that stuff matters. And that's a big machine and it's effective and there's a global reach. But what it really comes down to is the human one-on-one.
Yeah.
And when I'm talking to somebody about my work or they're asking me about my work, I'm not trying to sell them, but I'm trying to read them from a human level and a personal level as to, what they require. And we're all different. We're all have different personalities. In my experience, marketing my stuff in the context of a show, some people want and require all my attention. Some people don't want any of it.
Yeah.
And they want to look by themselves.
Yeah.
So it's my job and my responsibility and my goal to kind of, read them.
Yeah.
And, what do you need? And I'll give them everything they need. And, just by virtue of this podcast, I mean, I like talking about my work and because there's lots of things that go into it, and every painting has a story and a provenance. So if there was an audience for that, if a person wants background, I'll give it to them. And it's, because an artist it's in any kind of marketing, it's important to be generous too. And it's, in my view, you can never, say and do too much because if people want that information, at least it's there. If people don't want to read it, or see it, they don't have to see it, but that's part of my approach too with marketing and social media posting and so on. I try to be generous with the information. I don't cut corners.
Yep.
I give the full story. Again, you have the option to read it or not.
Yeah.
But because every piece has a story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And with that too, Jordan, I mean, it's like, consistent with reading somebody, not that I hold back all the information, but it's extremely important that a person connects with a given painting on their own terms.
Yeah.
Not to say they won't buy it otherwise, but if I give away the whole story, maybe they think, well, it's his story, it's not my story.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
and that's
there
important.
might be a little bit of imagination involved from the consumer point of view, right?
Bet.
You don't want to take that away from them, which I think you instill in a lot of your portraits from the backdrops on a lot of them. They're abstract. They're this cloud that people are probably filling in for themselves.
See, that's exactly it. You know, I mean, we three of us can stand in front of a painting and say what it is. What it means to everyone is different, right?
Yeah.
And I often, think, and I'll say that, it often says more about the person acquiring a painting than the artist painting it. Somebody steps up and says, I love that painting. I'm prepared to spend that much money on it. I want it in my space for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And I'll probably look at it 10 times a day. That's pretty heady stuff. And it's a humbling kind of responsibility and honor on the part of the painter to have people do that. To impact in someone's life in some small way is really something. We can go into museums now and look at paintings that are created 500, 600, 700 years ago with inferior products, and materials. There's no reason why one of my paintings can't last for 500, 600, 700 years as well.
Yeah, or more.
Or more. If they're handled properly.
Yep.
And again, because materials are that much better, the canvas and the paints and so on. So that too is an interesting dynamic. When I kind of ritualistically, sign my painting, it represents the completion of that painting, but it's also, then it goes into into this unknown future that it could impact in some way, good or bad, for generations of people.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting stuff, I feel,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking about generations, and you've done a lot of work, and you just had your 65th birthday. You celebrated over at Cam Clark's Western store there, which is Smithfield.
Yeah.
Sorry. Tip of my tongue, the white hats of Calgary. Yeah. So what is the future hold for Paul Van Ginkel? Like, is there a retirement that would ever happen? Or like, is it just more of I'm going to keep going, but at my speed?
Yeah. Historically, a lot of artists, and again, when I say artists, it's all disciplines, really get in their groove in their 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And if they've been doing it for decades, there's no surprise by that.
Yeah.
There's no guarantee that one gets better along the way because a lot of work was best in certain periods, whether it be a film that was made or a painting series or whatever. But I like to think that applies to me. I want to leverage. Why would I retire? Why would I retire the fun, the daily fun of it, and the challenge?
As well.
Yeah. And the exhilaration of having butterflies going to the studio every morning. But all that work I've done in the past and all the experience and the wisdom, why would I retire that?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I leverage it into just being a better painter?
Yeah, 100%.
So that is my motivation. And I feel I'm very fortunate that way. Not everyone retires, but those that don't
is it common for artists to retire, like painters? Like I think if you go 40 years painting, you're probably so passionate about it. I couldn't see myself retiring.
Yeah.
And I'm not even a painter.
Yeah.
But I love what I do.
Yeah.
And I could not see myself stopping.
Yeah.
Like for painters, musicians even, I'm sure even if you stop touring, you're still,
Oh, because, we touch on this at the very start, Jordan. It's almost like there's no choice,
Yeah.
You are that
It
person.
drives you.
It drives you.
Yeah.
If one is a creative person, and I fall in that category, you need to create, And I guess it's almost like a sports analogy that, the athlete will know when it's time to retire, because they'll just know. Not, short of contracts and stuff like that. So I kind of think that too. But I don't anticipate, I may slow down somewhat as I have over the years, even though I still check in 40 hours a week at the studio. But I remain ambitious, inspired. I truly feel my best work is ahead of me, and I want to keep on moving that way.
Yeah.
And so there's no reason for me to retire anytime soon. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
We covered a lot.
Yeah, no kidding.
And I could talk to you forever, Paul. But no, I want to thank you for your time, and especially during your busy season, taking the time to come down to the studio and chat for an hour and kind of going through everything. And it's always inspiring. It's always a good conversation.
Yeah, I agree, Jordan. Thank you for this. I'm sort of thinking that's what I heard about teachers, that often, like some of them, when they have taught or when they teach, they kind of learn so much about themselves too.
Yeah.
So in these, for you to provide these opportunities for me, I mean, I really appreciate it, because I kind of, analyze and I look at the details, because it's all about the details. Life is about
take a second to reminisce.
Yeah, I take a second to all that, because there's few opportunities of this duration to express myself. And so it's beneficial to me too, and
we've got that a few times so far, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jordan.